The hydrofracking revolution, which is bringing shale oil and shale gas to many parts of the world, is very profitable, but it is not putting the world on a trajectory that is sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. And I do think that we're seeing, if we care to open our eyes, a rather alarming reality about climate change. It's not news anymore, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that is that the issue of climate change used to be talked about as a problem of the future, and it is now a problem of the immediate present. In every part of the world, in every year, there are a number of calamities that vastly outnumber anything that we experienced even 20 years ago. The global climate system is simply changing a lot faster than our minds are changing, our institutions are changing, or our energy system is changing. And as countries sometimes feel themselves invulnerable to these realities, they're occasionally jarred out of that fantasy by very harsh shocks. I come from New York City. It's a place that considers itself pretty sophisticated. It's a place that couldn't get the power supply on for millions of people for a month after a major hurricane hit in November. And the city was unprepared, as was the East Coast unprepared for a massive amount of flooding, which has come from the fact that the sea level has risen by about a foot over the past century, and so when a massive storm hit, the amount of flooding was of an unprecedented character. But the United States was actually hit by 3 shocks this past year. The warmest year in the instrument history of the United States, the massive drought that hit more than 60% of the U.S. and caused a huge damage to the food supply and sent wheat and soybean and maize prices worldwide soaring once again, and the Hurricane Sandy, which struck in early November. But if you look at almost any part of the world, the story is the same. The size of the shocks, the droughts, the floods, the extreme events are coming at an alarming rate. I don't think that our discussion is adequate yet. We do not have a solution trajectory that is, first of all, even identified. The United States, for example, does not have an energy plan. We have no policy that is agreed in the United States, not even a policy that has been put forward clearly in the United States to explain how we will get on a low-carbon trajectory. And while we are in the middle of our new gold rush of hydrofracking, and we tell ourselves conveniently that natural gas is clean, it is cleaner than coal, but it is absolutely not clean enough to divert us from a trajectory of grave damage on the environment. Let's be clear about that. We use rhetoric which lulls us to complacency to say that natural gas is a clean energy source. It is not a low-carbon energy source. It's low-carbon only in comparison to coal, but it is high-carbon compared to what our climate can take. And in the United States, for a number of reasons, we have not been able to create a framework that describes to the American people, for example, what is a trajectory to reach a low-carbon economy. Even less do we have a public policy. We don't have a carbon tax. We don't have a permit system. We have no agreement on this. And if you look around the major economies of the world, this is basically true with the partial exception of Europe. So my view is that we are not anywhere close to where we need to be, and we should not feel that we're on the right track, that we have turned the corner, or that this is basically a story of good news. And it worries me. It worries me a lot as an American, because if the U.S. government can't even get it together to make a policy proposal in this area, how can many other countries in the world be expected to do so when the world's leading economy and the one that has the most historical responsibility by far has not done it? If you look at the case of China, China is a remarkably dependent economy on coal to this day. Indeed, we all saw worldwide the pictures of Beijing from yesterday, where the air was so dirty that the people were told, don't go outside. And we saw the hazy pictures where it was unsafe to walk outside. This is China's reality. But if you look at China's economic reality, there is no plan right now that really gets China to a low carbon trajectory, even though China is the #1 carbon emitter in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, if we take the climate change issue seriously, which I say if because we have not done so for the 21 years since signing the Framework Convention, we know that the aggregate amount of emissions has to decline significantly over the next 40 years at an annual rate compared to today. We're now emitting 32 billion tons of CO2 per year. That number continues to rise by around 4% per year right now. If we're going to get anything that is remotely safe for our children, that has to come down to 10 to 15 billion tons, not to continue to rise. We need plans to do that. We don't have plans right now. We don't have scenarios, we don't have trajectories, and we don't have public policies in place to do that. I'm happy to be here in a country which is committed to finding sustainable development solutions. And I'm happy to be here with IRENA, a global organization that is committed to finding ways to pursue renewable energy. My strong recommendation is that we do the arithmetic together over the next year, that we look at the actual numbers rather than consoling ourselves with how many gigawatts of one kind of energy or another have been put in place. What counts is not what we're doing, but what we're failing to do. What we're failing to do is to slow the growth of emissions of greenhouse gases. And if we don't move in a wholly different trajectory from the one we're on, we absolutely cannot do that. So I've been asked as part of this constellation of institutions to help lead a solutions network of scientists, academia, and business on behalf of the Secretary General to try to find practical approaches. And I believe that our first job is the arithmetic job. What would it really mean to get on a low carbon trajectory? It will mean a wholly different energy system from the one that we have, introduced within the next 25 years, of which no major economy has this underway right now, with, again, the partial exception of Europe and notable examples like Germany within Europe, but not China, not the United States, not India, not other major economies